truck had been sitting in the parking lot of Halverson and Associates for 43 minutes before Dex Halloran turned off the engine. Atlas did not move. The dog was asleep across the passenger seat with his chin on the armrest, one ear flat, one ear upright, the way he slept when he trusted the location, but not the situation. The engine ticked as it cooled. Outside, Billings was doing what Billings did in October, pushing cold air down from the north in long, flat gusts that moved the dead leaves across the asphalt in circles that never quite closed. Dex looked at the envelope on his thigh. It had been there since the county courthouse in Great Falls 2 weeks ago, when a clerk he'd never met had handed it across a counter without ceremony and said his name like she was reading from a list. He had not opened it in the courthouse. He had driven 40 miles south before pulling over, and then he had sat on the shoulder of I-15 for 20 minutes with the envelope in his hand before he opened it, and then he had read it once and folded it back up and not read it again. He knew what it said. He did not need to read it again. Owen Ray Halloran, age 57, had died on November 7th of this year following complications from a stroke. He had named his sole surviving family member, Dexter James Halloran, as the beneficiary of his estate. The estate consisted of one grain storage silo structure and the surrounding 12 acres of agricultural land in Cascade County, Montana. Appraised value, as noted in the will, $8. Dex had stared at that number for a long time on the side of I-15. He was not sure what he'd expected. Not money. They had not spoken in 22 years, and a man who does not speak to his brother for 22 years does not expect to be remembered kindly in a will. But $8 had a specific quality to it. $8 was not an accident. $8 was something Owen had chosen with the same deliberate precision he had applied to everything in his life. Dex just did not know what it meant yet. Atlas lifted his head. Not toward the law office. Sideways in the direction of the street, ears rotating with the independent accuracy of something designed for exactly this. Filtering the relevant from the irrelevant, separating signal from noise. Then he looked at Dex. One long, unhurried look, the way he had been looking at Dex for 8 years, the way that said nothing in particular except that he was paying attention and intended to keep doing so. "I know," Dex said. He got out of the truck. The receptionist inside Halverson and Associates was too young to have heard of Owen Halloran and too professional to show it. She led Dex to a back office where a man named Gerald Fitch, 50-something, the kind of thin that came from decades of desk work and cafeteria coffee, stood up and shook his hand with the practiced warmth of someone who did this regularly and had learned to mean it anyway. "Mr. Halloran, thank you for coming in. You said it was necessary. Your brother left specific instructions." Fitch gestured to the chair across from his desk. "He wanted the key delivered in person. He was very particular about that." Dex sat. He had left Atlas in the truck with the window cracked. He was aware of the distance between himself and the truck in the way he was always aware of it, like a length of rope with a specific amount of give. Fitch opened a folder and began. The legal language moved through the room like water finding its level. Terms of conveyance, property description, tax status, recorded encumbrances. Dex listened the way he had learned to listen in the Marines, which was to filter for the thing that mattered and let the rest move past. The thing that mattered was at the end. Fitch set a key on the desk between them, standard padlock key, worn smooth at the bow. Then he set a folded index card beside it. "He asked that I read this to you directly," Fitch said. His words, verbatim. Dex looked at the index card. Fitch picked it up. He cleared his throat once, not from discomfort, from the particular care of a man who understood he was carrying something that belonged to someone else. He read, "Dex will know what to do. He always did, even when he thought he didn't. Let Atlas in first. He'll find it before you do." The office held the words for a moment. Fitch set the card down carefully, as if returning something borrowed. "That was all he wrote," he said. I asked if he wanted to add anything further. He said no. He said you'd understand." Dex picked up the key. The metal was cold and light. Owen's hands had been on this key. His fingerprints were worn into the bow, invisible now, but there, the accumulated friction of years of use, reaching for this particular lock in the particular dark of whatever he'd been keeping locked. "Did you know him?" Dex asked. "We handled his taxes for 12 years. Fitch paused. "He was a quiet man. He came in once a year, always January, always had everything organized in a folder. He never missed a payment." He looked at the key on the desk, then back at Dex. "He asked about you every year, not directly. He would ask if I had any clients who were veterans, and I would say yes sometimes, and he would ask how they were doing. Generally." Fitch seemed to consider whether to continue. "Last January, he said, 'If my brother comes looking for me after I'm gone, make sure he gets the key himself. Don't mail it. Don't leave it with anyone else.' He said it the way a man says something he's thought about for a long time." Dex closed his hand around the key. Outside, the cold was working its way under the door in thin drafts that moved along the floor. He was aware of it against his boots. He was aware of Fitch across the desk, watching him with the careful neutrality of a man who had learned to sit with other people's grief without trying to fix it. He put the key in his jacket pocket, next to the envelope he had been carrying for 2 weeks. "GPS coordinates?" he said. Fitch handed him a printed page. "It's approximately 90 minutes north. The road turns to gravel about 4 miles before the property. Your vehicle should handle it." Dex stood, shook Fitch's hand again, walked out through the reception area and into the cold and across the parking lot to the truck where Atlas was sitting up straight in the passenger seat, watching him come. He got in. He did not start the engine immediately. He looked at the key in his palm, then at the index card he'd taken from the desk. Fitch had offered it without being asked, as if he'd understood it was not a legal document. It was something else. Let Atlas in first. As if Owen had known the dog was still alive. As if he had assumed with complete certainty that 8 years would not have changed that particular arrangement between the two of them. As if he had sat somewhere in the last months of his life and thought, Atlas will still be there. Dex will still have him. Dex folded the card once and put it in his shirt pocket. He started the engine. Atlas settled back into the passenger seat, chin on the armrest, one eye tracking the parking lot as they pulled out. The mountains were visible to the west, the first serious snow already on the upper peaks, white against a sky the color of old pewter. 90 minutes north. 22 years since he had spoken to his brother. 22 years since he had stood in the doorway of a farmhouse that no longer existed, holding a phone that wouldn't stop ringing, and made a decision about a man he thought he'd understood completely. He had been wrong about a lot of things in 52 years. He kept both hands on the wheel and drove north into the cold. The gravel road started exactly where the GPS said it would, at a rusted cattle gate with a county road sign so faded the number was gone. Dex turned in and felt the truck's suspension register the change. Packed dirt under the tires, washboarded from a summer of rain and freezing and thawing, and no maintenance. The road ran straight west for 2 miles, then bent north, and then the silo appeared. He stopped the truck. He had grown up in Montana. He knew grain silos the way he knew fence lines and irrigation ditches, and the specific way the wind moved across flat land with nothing to stop it. He had a reference point for what a silo looked like when it was working and what it looked like when it wasn't. This one had been not working for a long time. The corrugated metal walls had gone from galvanized silver to a deep, uneven rust, not uniformly, in patches and streaks, as if the weather had been selective about what it chose to consume first. One of the ladder rungs near the base was missing. The roof cap was still in place but had shifted several degrees off-center, the way a hat sits on a man who's been asleep. 12 acres of what had once been cropland surrounded it, the soil hard and pale, matted with dead grass and volunteer thistle. There was a cabin to the east of the silo, single room, maybe 200 square feet, board and batten siding that had once been red and was now the color of old dried blood. Dex sat with the engine running and looked at all of it. Atlas put his front paws on the dashboard. Not aggressively, just elevation. The dog was looking through the windshield at the property with the focused interest he gave to new terrain, reading whatever it was he read when he looked at a place for the first time. His tail moved once, not excitement, something more considered than that. Dex put the truck in gear and pulled the rest of the way in. He stepped out into the wind. Montana wind in October had a particular quality. It did not gust so much as press, a steady lateral force that pushed against the left side of the face and made the ears ache. He stood beside the truck and let it push against him and looked at 12 acres of nothing and a 40-foot metal cylinder that his brother had spent 22 years maintaining taxes on at the cost of approximately $800 a year, according to the records Fitch had provided. $19,000 in property taxes over 22 years, for $8 of property. He heard the truck door behind him. Atlas had let himself out the passenger side. The dog had learned the door handle at age 3, and Dex had never bothered to retrain him out of it. He came around the front of the truck and stood beside Dex without being called and looked at the silo. "I know," Dex said again. It was not a complete thought. It did not need to be. He walked to the cabin first. The padlock on the door matched the key. It opened with the stiff resistance of a lock that had not been turned in months. Inside, a wood stove, a narrow cot with a sleeping bag folded on it, a table with 2 chairs, a small shelf with a handful of books, a countertop with a camp stove, and a hand pump connected to the well line. Functional, sparse. A window above the table faced west, toward the silo, so that whatever Owen had seen every morning over his coffee was that particular view of rust and sky. Dex stood in the center of the room. The smell was dust and old wood and something under that, something specific he couldn't name immediately. Then he placed it. Linseed oil. Owen had rubbed linseed oil into the floor, recently enough that it was still working its way into the grain of the wood. You did not treat a floor with linseed oil in a place you were abandoning. You did it in a place you intended to maintain. Owen had been maintaining this. Atlas crossed the room and went directly to the far wall, where an old refrigerator stood unplugged with its door open. He sniffed along the base of it, then sat down, then looked back at Dex with the particular attention he reserved for situations where he had found something but wasn't done yet. "Not now," Dex said. Atlas looked at the refrigerator, then at Dex, then at the refrigerator. "Later," Dex said. He went back outside. The town of Rayfield was 4 miles east on the county road. A grain elevator, a post office the size of a garden shed, and a general store with a hand-painted sign that said Clara's, and below it, in smaller letters, groceries, hardware, propane, and such. Dex drove in at mid-afternoon and parked in front and went inside with Atlas at his heel. The woman behind the counter was 67 years old and had the particular economy of someone who had spent decades standing in the same spot learning the difference between what people said and what they needed. She looked at Dex. She looked at Atlas. Her expression did not change, but something behind it settled. The way things settle when you recognize something you'd been waiting for without knowing you were waiting. "You're Owen's brother," she said. It was not a question. Dex understood immediately that he had Owen's build, Owen's way of standing with his weight slightly back, Owen's tendency to take up exactly the space he needed, and no more. "Clara Briggs," the woman said. She did not come out from behind the counter, but she extended her hand across it, and Dex shook it. Her grip was direct and brief, the handshake of someone who meant it and didn't need to prove it. "I knew your brother 20 years. "I didn't know he was in Montana," Dex said. "He knew you were." She turned and began moving along the shelves behind her, pulling things without being asked. Coffee, canned soup, crackers, a box of dry dog food with a shepherd on the label, setting them on the counter one by one. He followed you, not in a strange way. He just knew where you were. Billings the last 3 years. Before that, Missoula. Before that, he lost track of you for a while, and it bothered him more than he let on. Dex watched her work. He never called. No. Clara set the dog food down and looked at him steadily. He said he didn't have the right, that you'd have to decide to come to him. She paused. I told him that was foolish. He said maybe. He was stubborn that way. She looked at Atlas. Owen talked about that dog. Said you'd had him since Fallujah. Said if the dog was still alive when he died, it would mean you were somewhere close to okay. Dex said nothing. He left you something worth having, Clara said. Her voice was flat, not unkind. I know it doesn't look like it. I've seen that silo for 20 years, and I know what it looks like to someone who doesn't know what they're looking at. She pushed the groceries toward him. But Owen was not a foolish man, and he was not a cruel one. Whatever he left you, it was deliberate. Dex reached for his wallet. She waved her hand. Pay me when you come back through. You'll be back. He was almost to the door when she spoke again. A man came through here about a week before Owen passed, she said. Nicely dressed. Drove a company truck, Meridian AgriCorp logo on the side. He stopped in here asking about the silo property. Who owned it? Whether it was likely to sell. She let that sit for a moment. I told him I didn't know. It wasn't entirely true. Dex turned. He had the particular look, Clara said, of a man who already knew the answer to the question he was asking. I've seen that look before. It never leads anywhere good. She turned back to her shelves and resumed moving things with the unhurried efficiency of a woman who had said what she meant to say and did not need to watch it land. Outside, the wind had picked up. Atlas sat beside the truck door and did not look at the store. He looked west, toward the silo property, with the specific forward orientation of an animal that had already decided where it was going. Dex put the groceries in the back and got in and drove west into the wind. The first 2 nights, Dex slept on Owen's cot in Owen's sleeping bag and stared at Owen's ceiling and listened to the wind work its way through the gaps in the board and batten siding. He did not sleep well. This was not new. He had not slept well in 14 years and had stopped expecting to. He lay in the dark and thought about Clara's words. A man from Meridian AgriCorp asking about the property a week before Owen died. Not after. Before. Which meant either the timing was coincidence or someone at Meridian had known Owen was running out of time before Owen's own family did. Dex did not believe in coincidences of that precision. He had spent too many years in places where things that looked like coincidences turned out to be logistics. He thought about the $8. Owen had been a deliberate man. Dex knew that even after 22 years of not speaking, you do not forget the fundamental qualities of someone you grew up alongside. Owen did not do things accidentally. He did not say things he did not mean. If he had valued this property at $8, it was because he understood something about its value that he did not want recorded in any document that might be read before Dex arrived. He thought about the index card. Let Atlas in first. He'll find it before you do. Atlas was asleep on the floor beside the cot, his breathing slow and even in the dark. Dex put one hand down and felt the rise and fall of the dog's ribs without thinking about it, the way you reach for a wall in an unfamiliar room, for orientation, not comfort. The ribs moved. The heartbeat was there under his palm, slower than a human heart, steadier. He slept around 2 in the morning, shallow the way he always slept. He woke at first light to the sound of nothing, no Atlas breathing beside the cot. He opened his eyes. The dog was not in the cabin. The door was closed, but unlatched. Atlas had learned door handles, and he had learned that unlatched was not the same as locked. Dex pulled on his boots and his jacket and went outside. The morning was pale and windless, which was unusual for this part of Montana. The sky above the Rockies to the west was the color of pewter going to silver. The silo stood in the early light, with its rust-caught bronze, almost beautiful from this angle, the way damaged things sometimes were in the right light at the right hour. Atlas was at the base of the silo's west wall. He was not looking at the wall, he was looking at the ground. His nose was approximately 6 inches above the earth, moving in the slow arcs Dex had watched for 8 years. The systematic pattern of an animal reading something written in a language without alphabet or syntax. Then he stopped moving. Both front feet planted, nose down. He began to scratch. Not frantically, not the way a dog digs at a hole in the ground. Methodical, one paw, then the other. The way you work at a problem you intend to solve. The dead grass tore away in patches. The soil underneath was harder than the surrounding ground, packed tight, the particular density of earth that has been disturbed and resettled many times. Dex crouched beside him. He pressed his palm flat against the dirt and felt it, harder, yes, but also different in a way he could not immediately name. Not natural compression. Something underneath changing the acoustic quality of the surface. He knocked with his knuckle once, and the sound that came back was not the sound of ground. It was something closer to the sound of a floor. He looked at Atlas. Atlas looked at the ground, then at Dex, then at the ground. "Okay," Dex said. "Not yet." He stood and walked to the cabin. Inside, he went directly to the refrigerator. Atlas had sat in front of it twice now. Dex had said not yet twice now, and the dog had accepted the delay with the patience of an animal that had learned that Dex's not yet and Dex's never were different things, and that waiting was sometimes the correct tactical decision. He pulled the refrigerator away from the wall. It was heavier than it looked, full-size, older model, the kind built when appliances were made to outlast their owners. It moved with the reluctance of something that had not been moved in years, the feet leaving pale streaks in the linseed oil on the floor. Behind it, the wall, board and batten like the rest of the cabin, but at the base, set flush with the floorboards, was a metal box. Not large, 30 centimeters by 40, perhaps 10 deep. Brushed steel, the kind used for waterproofing. A latch on the front, no lock. Dex sat down on the floor, cross-legged back against the refrigerator. He set the box on his knees. Atlas came and sat directly in front of him, close enough that Dex could feel the warmth coming off the dog's coat. He did not look at the box. He looked at Dex's face, the way he did when he was monitoring rather than investigating, when his job was the person rather than the thing. Dex opened the latch. Inside, letters. A stack of them bound with a rubber band that had gone brittle with age and snapped when he touched it. He caught the stack before it spread. He counted without meaning to. 47, each one in an envelope, each envelope with a date written in the upper left corner in Owen's handwriting. The tight forward-leaning print of a man who had learned to write quickly and never unlearned it. The dates ran from December of 2003 to November 3rd of this year. December 2003 was 6 months after Dex had stood in the doorway of the family farmhouse and told his brother he was done, that he was leaving and not coming back, that some things could not be taken back, and Owen had done one of them. November 3rd was 4 days before Owen died. Dex did not move for a long time. The light through the west window was changing, the pewter going gold as the sun cleared the horizon behind the cabin, the silo outside catching it and throwing back a warmth that had no right to come from that much rust. He sat on the floor with 47 letters on his knees and the dog 6 inches away and did not open the first one. Not yet. He looked at Owen's handwriting on the top envelope. The date, December 14th, 2003. The ink had faded slightly at the edges, the way ink does when it has sat in the dark for 22 years, waiting for light to find it. He turned the envelope over. On the back, in smaller letters, an addition written at a different time, the ink darker and the pen pressure heavier, as if Owen had come back to it years later. "I don't know if you'll ever read this. I wrote it anyway. That's the only thing I know how to do." Dex set the envelope back on the stack. He put both hands flat on top of the letters, the way you put your hands on something you are not ready to open, but are not willing to put down. Atlas pressed forward until his forehead rested against Dex's knee. He held it there, not moving, just the steady weight of the dog's head, warm through the denim, grounding without asking anything in return. Outside, the gold light was moving across the dead grass of the 12 acres, turning even the thistle into something that briefly resembled intention. Dex sat there until the coffee on the camp stove boiled over and hissed against the burner. Then he got up, poured what was left, and sat at the table by the west window with 47 letters lined up beside the mug in the order Owen had written them. Oldest to most recent, the way you read something that was meant to be read in sequence. He picked up December 14th, 2003. He opened it. Owen did not write like a man making his case. That was the first thing Dex noticed. He had expected, without knowing he expected it, justification, explanation. The architecture of an argument Owen had been constructing for 22 years, each letter another layer of reasoning, each envelope another attempt to prove that what he had done was understandable, if not forgivable. That was not what he found. The first letter was 2 pages. Owen wrote about a morning in October of 2003, 3 months after Dex had left, a morning when he had driven out to the field at first light and stood where the fence line used to be, the one their father had built the summer both boys were too young to help but old enough to watch. The fence was gone by then. The land on the other side of it, 140 acres of winter wheat, ground that the Halloran family had worked for 3 generations, already had a Meridian AgriCorp survey stake in the northeast corner. Owen did not describe how he felt about this. He described the color of the sky. He described the specific sound the dead grass made in the wind. He described how long he stood there before he got back in the truck. "I drove home and made coffee and sat at the table where Dad used to sit," Owen wrote, "and I thought about calling you. I picked up the phone twice. The second time I dialed 4 digits before I stopped. I don't know what I would have said. I don't know what there was to say that wouldn't have sounded like I was asking you to forgive me, and I didn't think I had the right to ask that. So I put the phone down and I started writing this instead." Dex read that paragraph 3 times. He moved through the letters the way you move through something that keeps shifting the ground under you, carefully, with attention to where you were placing your weight. Owen's voice on the page was not the voice Dex remembered from their last conversation. The last conversation had been loud in the way that things get loud when they have been quiet too long. Owen's voice in the letters was something else, quieter than anything Dex had heard from him in person. Quieter than seemed possible from a man he had known to be as stubborn as old fence wire. By the 23rd letter, dated March of 2011, Owen had begun mentioning Meridian by name. Not with anger. With the flat, informational precision of a man filing a report on something he had been observing for years. He had found the original contract, the one their father had signed in 1987 for a loan against the land. He had found the amendment to that contract, signed in 2001, which transferred mineral and agricultural development rights in the event of default. He had found that the signature on the amendment was their father's name but not their father's hand. Their father had been in the hospital in Billings in March of 2001, recovering from his first cardiac event. He could not have driven to Great Falls to sign anything. Someone had signed it for him. Owen did not use the word forgery. He used the phrase inconsistency in execution and wrote that he had taken the document to a handwriting analyst in Helena who had used a different phrase. Owen had paid for that analysis out of his own pocket. He had then spent 3 years locating 3 other families in Cascade County who had lost land to Meridian under similar circumstances. Dex set that letter down and picked up the next one, and then the next. The accumulation of Owen's work spread across the table in front of him. 22 years of careful, methodical, entirely private labor, conducted in a one-room cabin 40 feet from a rusted silo that nobody wanted, documented in letters addressed to a brother who had stopped speaking to him. He did not read the last letter yet. He was aware that he was not ready for it, the way you are sometimes aware of a door you are not ready to open. Outside, headlights swept across the cabin window. Dex was on his feet before he consciously decided to stand. 14 years of muscle memory, the particular alertness that does not fully turn off even after the uniform is gone. Atlas was already at the door, body stiff, ears forward, the low register of attention that was not quite a growl, but was the thing that came before one. The headlights belonged to a late-model pickup, dark blue, the Meridian AgriCorp logo a lighter blue on the door. The man who stepped out was perhaps 50, wearing a vest over a collared shirt, the kind of clothes that said professional without committing to formal. He walked across the property with the unhurried confidence of someone who had done this before and expected it to go the way it usually went. Dex stepped outside. "Mr. Halloran." The man stopped 10 feet away and smiled. Not a bad smile, practiced even, with the particular warmth of someone who had learned that warmth was efficient. "I'm Craig Sutter, VP of Land Acquisition at Meridian AgriCorp. I apologize for the hour. I tried to reach you through the estate attorney." He looked at the silo, then at the cabin, then back at Dex with the expression of a man conducting a rapid and unfavorable appraisal. "We'd like to make you an offer on the property. $890,000. Clean transfer, no contingencies, close in 60 days. Dex said nothing. Sutter's eyes moved to Atlas. Something in his expression recalibrated, a small shift, the kind that happens when a man's internal calculation updates with new information. Atlas had not moved. He was standing at Dex's left side, body angled slightly forward, the scar behind his left ear catching the light from the cabin window. "It's a fair offer," Sutter said. "The land isn't productive and the structure needs significant remediation. We see potential your brother didn't have the resources to develop." "What kind of potential?" Dex said. "Agricultural consolidation. We're building out our regional operation in Cascade County. This parcel connects 2 larger holdings." "Is that right?" "It's a strong offer for 12 acres of fallow land and a storage structure in this condition." Sutter looked at the silo again. The neutral assessment of a man putting a number on something. "I'd encourage you not to let the emotional dimension of the inheritance complicate the practical decision." Dex looked at him for a moment. "I'll think about it," he said. Sutter produced a card from his vest pocket and held it out. Dex took it. The card was heavy stock, embossed lettering, the kind that cost money to print because cost was a signal. 72 hours, Sutter said. "The offer is time limited. We have other parcels under evaluation in the county." He walked back to the truck with the same unhurried confidence he'd arrived with, got in, and drove east toward the county road without looking back. Dex stood in the cold and watched until the taillights disappeared. Atlas watched until they were gone, then looked at Dex. Dex went back inside. He sat at the table and looked at the letters spread across it and Sutter's card beside them, and thought about what Clara had said. He had the look of a man who already knew the answer to the question he was asking. Meridian had come the week before Owen died. They had come the week after Dex arrived. Whatever Owen had kept in this property, they had known about it long enough to be waiting. He picked up the 31st letter. It was dated June of 2014. Owen's handwriting in this one was slightly different, the same tight print, but with more pressure behind it, as if something had shifted in him in the months before he wrote it. "I signed the papers in February of 2001, Owen wrote. "I want you to know I knew what I was signing. I want you to know I did it, because Meridian had called in the loan amendment, and I didn't have the capital to contest it, and I was 23 days from losing everything, including the house. I want you to know I was 29 years old, and I was alone, and I was scared, and I made the decision a scared 29-year-old makes when there is no one to call. Dex stopped reading. He set the letter down flat on the table. The smell of the cabin shifted, or he noticed it differently. The linseed oil on the floor, the cold coming through the siding, and under that, something specific, something that did not belong to the cabin at all, but arrived without announcement, the way memories arrive when the defenses are down. The smell of the farmhouse kitchen, their mother's coffee pot on the back burner. Owen at the table doing homework in the particular circle of lamplight that was his from the time he was 7 years old. Owen at the table, smaller than Dex remembered him being, working quietly at something the way he always worked, with the patience of someone who had decided that the thing in front of him was worth the time it took. The flashback did not come as images. It came as weight, the specific pressure of a day Dex had been carrying for 22 years, settling all at once onto his chest, not with violence, but with the exhausted finality of something that had been waiting a very long time to be set down. He was on his feet without knowing he had stood. His hand was on the back of the chair. The cabin was too small, and the walls were where they had always been, and the letters were on the table, and Owen had been 29 years old, and scared and alone. Dex had been in Fallujah in February of 2001. He had not been available to call. Atlas crossed the room in 3 steps and pressed his full weight against Dex's leg, not gently, not tentatively, with the solid, unambiguous force of an animal that had been trained for exactly this and had never stopped being ready for it. 90 pounds of old dog, leaning in, warm through the denim, real and specific, and here. Dex put his hand on the dog's back. The walls stayed where they were. He stood there until his breathing steadied, and then he sat back down, and he picked up the 31st letter, and he kept reading. Because there were 16 more letters after this one. Because Owen had written them for a reason. Because a man who spent 22 years writing letters to a brother who wasn't there had been trying to say something, and Dex was going to hear all of it. He owed Owen that. He owed him that, at least. He read through the night. Not because he decided to, because stopping did not occur to him. The camp stove went cold, and the coffee in the mug went cold, and the wind outside picked up sometime after midnight and pressed against the cabin siding with the steady insistence of weather that had somewhere to be. And Dex sat at the table under the single battery lantern and moved through Owen's letters the way you move through terrain you should have crossed years ago, with attention and without hurry, because the only direction available was forward. Owen's voice changed across 47 letters the way a river changes across distance. Same source, same essential character, but shaped differently by what it had moved through. The early letters were careful, almost formal, the writing of a man uncertain whether he was addressing a grievance or attempting a confession. By the middle years, they had loosened into something closer to conversation. The kind you have when you've stopped trying to persuade and started simply talking, because talking is the only thing left. By the final letters, they were something else entirely. Not resigned. Resolved. The difference between a man who has given up and a man who has finished deciding. The 46th letter, dated October 19th of this year, 18 days before Owen died, was 4 paragraphs. The first 3 documented with the quiet precision that had characterized everything Owen wrote, the final pieces of his work. He had located a 3rd handwriting analyst, one with court-recognized credentials in federal proceedings. He had obtained sworn statements from 2 former Meridian employees, one retired, one who had left the company under circumstances Owen described only as non-voluntary, regarding standard practices in loan amendment processing during the late 1990s. He had cross-referenced the Halloran case against 7 other documented transfers in Cascade, Chouteau, and Fergus counties, all bearing the same structural signature. The 4th paragraph was 1 sentence. "It's enough, Dex. What's in the silo is enough." Dex set the letter down. He sat with that sentence for a long time. Then he picked up the 47th letter. November 3rd, 4 days before Owen died. The handwriting in this one was different, the same forward-leaning print, but with letters that pressed harder into the page, as if the hand was working against something the body was losing. 3 lines. I tried to find you for 3 years. I should have tried harder, and I should have started sooner, and I know that. I'm leaving you the only thing I have that's worth anything, not the land, what's under it. Finish what I started. You were always better at the ending than I was. Dex folded the letter. He put it in his shirt pocket, next to the index card from Gerald Fitch's office. He looked at the east wall of the cabin. Gray light was coming through the window above the cot. Not sunrise yet, the particular gray that came before it, the color of the world deciding whether to begin. He had 72 hours from the previous evening. He had perhaps 68 left. He went outside. Atlas was already there. The dog had come out at some point in the night and was sitting at the base of the silo's west wall at the exact spot where he had scratched 2 mornings ago. He was not scratching now. He was sitting with the stillness of an animal that has completed one task and is waiting for the human to catch up. Dex went to the truck and got the short-handled spade he kept behind the seat. He dug. The ground at that spot was harder than the surrounding soil by several degrees, not rock hard, but compressed, the density of earth that has been opened and closed deliberately. He went down 18 inches before the spade rang against something that was not soil. He cleared another 6 inches of dirt with his hands, working along the edges, and found it. A steel plate, 2 feet by 3, with a recessed handle, set flush so that nothing showed at grade level. He pulled. The plate came up on a counterweighted hinge, precisely balanced, swinging back to rest against the silo wall with a soft finality, as if it had been waiting for exactly this angle of force. Below it, a concrete shaft 3 feet square, dropping perhaps 5 feet to a poured floor. Iron rungs set into the near wall. The air that came up was cold and dry, the particular dryness of a sealed space maintained against moisture. He climbed down. The space at the bottom was larger than the shaft suggested, 8 feet by 10, ceiling low enough that he stood slightly crouched. Shelving along 3 walls, the metal kind sold in hardware stores, every shelf organized with the methodical patience that had characterized everything Owen had left behind. Labeled file boxes, 31 of them, each with a date range and a case designation written in Owen's hand. A fireproof document safe in the far corner, closed but not locked. A folding table with a portable scanner still plugged into a battery bank that showed, when Dex touched the power button, 40% charge remaining. Owen had been working down here, recently. Dex opened the safe. Inside, 4 manila envelopes, each sealed, each labeled in Owen's writing. The first said, Halloran, original documents. The second said, Meridian, forgery analysis. The third said additional families, Cascade, Chouteau, Fergus. The fourth said, Contact, P. Okafor, Billings. He's been waiting. Dex looked at that 4th envelope for a long time. He took all 4 upstairs into the morning light. He sat on the ground beside the open hatch with Atlas beside him and opened the 3rd envelope first. Inside, documentation for 3 additional families. The Brennans of Chouteau County, 180 acres, 2003. The Whitehorse family of Fergus County, 220 acres, 1999. The Gallagher operation, also Cascade County, 240 acres, 2005. Each case with its own file, its own analysis, its own cross-referenced evidence, connecting it to the same pattern, the same contract structure, the same signature irregularities. 340 Halloran acres plus 640 more. Nearly 1,000 acres across 3 counties. Owen had not just been building a case for the Hallorans, he had been building a case for everyone Meridian had taken from in a 20-year radius. Dex sat in the October grass with the documents spread around him, and understood what his brother had spent 22 years doing inside a rusted grain silo that nobody wanted, maintaining $8 of property at the cost of $19,000 in taxes, staying quiet and staying put and staying alive long enough to finish the work. And the only thing Dex could not reconcile was why Owen had done all of it without ever asking for help. Then he remembered the 31st letter. February of 2001. Owen was 29 and scared and alone, and Dex had been in Fallujah. Owen had asked for help once. Dex had not been available, so Owen had learned to do it without asking. He took the 4th envelope and drove to Clara's store when it opened at 7. She listened to all of it without sitting down, moving along her shelves with the slow efficiency of a woman who could do 2 things at once and always had. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment, straightening a row of canned goods that did not need straightening. "Pete Okafor," she said. "I know that name. He came through here 2 years ago asking about Meridian land transfers. I sent him to Owen." She paused. "Owen told me afterward that Pete was the right person, but that the timing wasn't right yet, that he needed 2 more years. "He had 2 more years, Dex said. "He just ran out of time at the end of them." Clara looked at the 4th envelope in his hand. "Pete will answer his phone," she said. "He's been looking for exactly this for 5 years. He'll answer on the first ring." She pushed her landline across the counter. Dex dialed the number from the envelope. Pete Okafor answered on the 2nd ring. 38 years old, the son of a Montana wheat farmer, 7 years building a land rights practice in Billings because he had watched his father's generation lose ground to corporate consolidation and decided that someone with a law degree should be in the room when it happened next. He listened to Dex for 4 minutes without interrupting. When Dex finished, Pete was quiet for 3 seconds. "How complete is the documentation?" he said. 31 file boxes, Dex said. "Original documents, forgery analysis with court-credentialed testimony, 4 families cross-referenced, scanner with a charged battery." Another 2 seconds of silence. "I can be in Cascade County by noon," Pete said. Sutter arrived at 10 that morning, 1 hour before his 72-hour window expired, with a woman in her 40s carrying a leather briefcase who introduced herself as Meridian's regional counsel. They crossed the property with the coordinated efficiency of people who had done this together before. Sutter's smile was in place, the same practiced warmth, calibrated to the right temperature for a veteran in a work jacket standing in front of a rusted silo. He looked once at Atlas standing at Dex's left, and the smile stayed, but something behind it performed a small, rapid calculation. The lawyer began outlining revised terms before Sutter had finished his greeting. The offer had increased. 1.1 million. Expedited close. Dex noted that neither of them mentioned the 72-hour deadline from the previous evening. Dex waited until the lawyer finished. "No," he said. Sutter's expression held for a moment, then reorganized itself into something more careful. "Mr. Halloran, I want to make sure you've had the opportunity to fully consider." "Pete Okafor is arriving at noon," Dex said. "He has everything Owen collected, all of it, including the Brennan documentation, the Whitehorse documentation, and the Gallagher documentation, including the forgery analysis on the 2001 loan amendment." He watched Sutter's face. "Including the sworn statements from your former employees." The lawyer stopped writing something in her notebook. Sutter looked at Dex for a long moment. The warmth was gone now, not gradually but completely, the way a light goes off at a switch. There, then not there. Underneath it was just a tired man in an expensive vest, standing in a Montana field that was not going to become what he needed it to be. He looked at Atlas. Atlas looked back at him with the unhurried attention he gave to most situations. Not hostile, not indifferent, simply present in the particular way of an animal that does not need to perform patience because it actually has it. Sutter picked up his briefcase. "We'll be in touch through our attorneys," he said. "I know," Dex said. He watched them walk back to the truck. He watched the truck turn and move east down the gravel road. He watched it until the dust settled back onto the road behind it and the sound of the engine faded into the flat distance of the plains. Atlas sat down beside him, one slow tail wag. That was all. Clara Briggs arrived 40 minutes later with coffee in a thermos and 3 names she had been carrying for 20 years. Neighboring farm families who had lost land to Meridian and had never known why the paperwork had felt wrong. She set the thermos on the hood of Dex's truck and unfolded a piece of paper with the names written in her careful hand. "Owen knew about the Petersons," she said. "I don't know if he knew about the Cranes." "He knew," Dex said. "He has a file." Clara looked at the silo, at the open hatch still visible at the base of the west wall, at 31 years of her neighbor's quiet work coming up into the light. She did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, "He was a good man. He just didn't know how to let anyone see it." Dex looked at the silo. "I know," he said. Spring came to Cascade County the way it always did, reluctantly, in arguments with itself, cold nights holding on into April as if the season had not yet made up its mind. The lawsuit was filed in February. 4 families named, 31 boxes of documentation entered into evidence, 2 former Meridian employees providing sworn depositions that the regional council had not anticipated and could not effectively rebut. Pete Okafor told Dex in March that the forgery analysis alone was enough to sink the 2001 amendment, and that everything Owen had built around it was the kind of evidentiary foundation that took most firms a decade to assemble. Owen had done it in 22 years, alone, in a one-room cabin, for $8. Dex did not sell the property. He had known he would not sell it from the moment he stood in Gerald Fitch's office with a key in his hand and a dog in a truck in the parking lot. He had not known why then. He knew now. Owen had not left him a silo. Owen had left him a post. Something to stand at and hold while the work Owen had started found its way to the people it was meant to reach. He fixed the cabin through the winter. Not extensively. He was not a man who needed extensively. He reglazed the windows, repointed the mortar along the north wall where the wind had found the gaps, replaced the missing ladder rung on the silo with a steel rod he machined himself at a shop in Rayfield. He did not touch the rust on the silo walls. The rust was honest. The rust was what the building looked like after 40 years of being exactly what it was. He saw no reason to change that. Clara brought heirloom wheat seed in March, a Montana heritage variety, the kind his father had grown, the kind that required patience and dry land technique and the particular knowledge that only came from watching the same ground over many years. She set the paper bag on the cabin table without ceremony and said she had been keeping it in a drawer for 15 years, waiting for someone to plant it again. Dex planted 8 of the 12 acres in April. The soil was harder than he'd expected from ground that had not been worked in decades, and softer than he'd expected in the low spots where the snowmelt had settled, and the work of turning it was the particular exhaustion that comes not from doing too much, but from doing exactly the right thing after a long time of doing other things instead. He worked from first light to mid-afternoon, and then stopped when his back told him to stop. Which was new, the stopping when his body asked, rather than pushing through on the reasoning that the body was a problem to be overridden. Atlas walked the rows behind him while he worked, not tracking anything, not looking for anything, moving through the turned earth with the unhurried investigation of an old dog that had been given a new set of information and was taking the time to read it properly. Pete Okafor called in late April with a preliminary ruling on the injunction. Meridian's operations on the contested acreage in all 3 counties were suspended pending the full proceeding. The Brennan family, who had been leasing back their own land from Meridian for 11 years, drove out to the silo property on a Saturday morning to shake Dex's hand. Carl Brennan was 63, weathered in the way that Montana farmers were weathered, not broken down, just thoroughly acquainted with weather. He shook Dex's hand and did not say much. He looked at the 12 acres of new wheat coming up in thin green rows. He looked at the silo. "Your brother was something," Carl Brennan said. "Yeah," Dex said. "He was." He had read the 47th letter 11 times by then. He had not read it aloud to anyone. The words in it belong to Owen and to him, and to the particular private accounting that happens between brothers who have wasted years and cannot get them back, but can decide what to do with the ones remaining. He kept it in his shirt pocket, next to the index card from Fitch's office. And when he reached for it in the evenings, sitting in the doorway of the cabin with the Rockies going purple in the last light, he did not always take it out. Sometimes, just knowing it was, there was the thing. Finish what I started. You were always better at the ending than I was. He was not sure that was true. He was not sure Owen had needed someone better at endings. He thought Owen had needed, 22 years ago, someone to answer the phone, someone to be in the same state, the same county, close enough to call, someone to look at a scared 29-year-old making an impossible choice and say, "I'm here. Tell me what you need." Dex had not been that person then. He was trying to be that person now, to whatever remained of the situation Owen had left him. It was not the same thing. He knew it was not the same thing, but it was what was available, and Owen, he had come to understand, was a man who worked with what was available. On a morning in May, Dex sat on the stone step outside the cabin door with his second cup of coffee and watched the light come across the 12 acres. The wheat was 6 inches high now, standing in rows that ran straight west toward the silo, each plant separate and distinct in the low-angle morning light, the whole field breathing in the small movement of air that came before the wind started. Atlas was in the field. He had gone out at first light, the slight hitch in his left rear leg, more visible in the cold, but loosening as he moved, working his way along the rows with the nose-down attention of an animal reading the ground the way the ground wanted to be read. He was not looking for anything in particular. He was doing what he did, moving through a new place, learning its specific language, cataloging what was here. He reached the west edge of the planted field, the unplanted 4 acres beyond it, still pale and hard, running to the silo wall. He walked to the spot where the hatch had been, filled in now, the steel plate replaced and the soil turned back over it, indistinguishable from the surrounding ground. He stopped. He stood at that spot for a moment, nose down, reading whatever remained in the soil of what Owen had built below it, the 31 boxes of documents now in a fireproof storage unit in Billings, the portable scanner in Pete Okafor's office, the work of 22 years relocated to the place where it could do what it had been made to do. Then Atlas turned and looked back toward the cabin. He found Dex on the step across 200 yards of new wheat and held the look for a moment, the scar behind his left ear catching the early light, one ear perfectly upright and one ear beginning to fold with age, and the specific tiredness of a dog who has been paying attention for a very long time. His tail moved. Once, slow, the full arc of it, sweeping the air beside him. Then he turned back toward the Rockies and put his nose up, not to the ground, but to the air above it, reading whatever the morning carried in from the west, from the high country where the snow was still on the peaks, and the water from it was already moving down through the rock toward the plains. Dex held his coffee cup with both hands. The wheat moved in the light. Some things a man carries too long before he sets them down. Some debts run in both directions, and you do not find that out until you are standing in a rusted grain silo in October with 47 letters in your hands and a dog who already knew where to look. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment below, just the word brother, if nothing else. And if you believe the quiet ones are worth listening to, stick around. We have more stories coming, and every one of them starts with a dog who was paying attention.